Hello, everyone. You know what I like? I like a horror story where the author will take a certain, maybe perhaps overdone horror trope and either elevate it or turn it around on its head and make it something that you feel like you're reading for the first time, even though you're in familiar territory. I love that kind of thing. People sometimes say there's nothing new under the sun, but trust me, this book will change your mind because this author does just that very thing with something we're all familiar with, and it's definitely a scary ride. So let's get into it right now. So today we're going to be talking about the book Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. Now I don't know about you, but after I'm done with a book, you know them extra pages in the back? I like to read those. Sometimes they're just acknowledgments or a word of thanks to people that have helped them along the way. But sometimes, and I really love this because I'm kind of a nerd about that, I'm kind of a geek, the author will include something about the book. Maybe the way it came to be, or perhaps some of the things that inspired the story. And come to find out, this book was actually written 10 years before it was published. And this is not a new book. This one has been out for a few years, even though this is my first time reading it. But he actually wrote it 10 years before. And for something that older, I guess you could say, it feels fresh. It feels something that anybody could write today and still be a bestseller. It just doesn't feel like it's a book that's old. And I just found that interesting and thought I'd share it with you. Well, basically, this book concerns really 4 horror authors. And in this book, in the world that he's created, these are 4 very famous, successful horror authors. We meet T.C. Moore. She's a fiery one, she is. She's full of piss and vinegar, as my mother used to say. She's rough around the edges. She says what's on her mind. She doesn't care who she offends or who she insults. She's just a straight-ahead, full-on, vicious woman, I guess you could say. Maybe not vicious, but she does not suffer fools gladly nor lightly. And she will go out of her way to make others uncomfortable with some of the things she says. Now, her style of writing is very, very graphic. She writes graphically about violence and sexual fetishes. And this is her brand of horror, very visceral, very in-your-face, leaving nothing to your imagination. Her philosophy is pain and pleasure are 2 sides of the same coin. And the torture and things portrayed in her book are very, very graphic. And then we have Sam. Now, Sam is like an everyman writer. He comes from the Midwest, a good old Midwestern boy, and his horror is more popular. He writes popular horror fiction, okay? And he's done well writing these books. His philosophy is more introduce people to the real world, suburbia, little small towns in the Midwest, family, friends, and then subvert that with something supernatural and scary happening to them, something I'm sure we're all familiar with. And then we have Daniel. Daniel's a Christian horror author. That's right, he believes in God, he's a believer, but he writes these short books, but he's very prolific, having written over 50 of them. But they all kind of deal with this morality thing where, the people in his book, they're aimed for young adults. And if you sin in this book, if you have evil in your heart, you're the bad guy, bad things are going to happen. But if you're good and hold on to righteousness and all that, then you'll come out fine. And each of his books has like a moral about good and evil in it. Some would even call him like a hack, that kind of thing. And then we have the elder statesman, Sebastian. In this book, he's like a world-famous horror author. He's been around for many, many years. He's getting up there in age. But everybody knows him, and most everybody respects him in the horror community. But he's more of a literary horror writer. He doesn't think you have to show the blood and the guts. He thinks it's better to leave it up to the imagination of the people, thinking that the human mind will come up with far worse things than he could put on paper. But he is still very well respected. Now, each of these authors has secrets that they're keeping and not sharing with anybody else, deep, dark secrets. We are privy to that throughout the book as things are revealed about their past and the demons that haunt them. But also, they all have new works coming out. And of course, they want to promote it. They want to do the best they can. So they all very reluctantly agree to a 2-day interview arranged by a man named Wainwright. Now, Wainwright is a trust fund baby, but he's also kind of one of those influencer guys, a younger guy in his early 20s. His goal is to make horror not just for the genre fans, but to bring it into pop culture in general to people who would normally not watch horror. And he does this on his website, where he has live streams featuring things that are sometimes set up, but things that will be controversial, anything to draw eyes to his site. He may be a little bit of a worm and a weasel, but he's very successful at it. And so the authors agree to conduct this interview because it pays a lot of money, and B, it's a good way to promote all their work, knowing that they're going to be seen by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of viewers on his website as they do the live interview. Now, they're going to do this interview, and this is a hook for Wainwright's little excursion with these guys. It's going to take place in the Kill Creek House, one of the most haunted places in the world, widely known as being a place of evil because of all the bad things that happened there since it was built a little bit past the Civil War by one man. Tragedy has beset the place, befallen upon it, and every time somebody goes to live there, they never stay more than a year because it's just a house with bad mojo, man. So they reluctantly agree and they go to the interview. Now, in any other book about a haunted house, right, the rest of the book would take place in the house and bad, strange things would happen, but not in this book. They get there, they do the interview, and there are some strange things that happen, but nobody really remembers in the morning quite what it was. They get a little fuzzy-minded, but they all get to leave the house. But this is where the book ramps up and starts becoming really good. And this is where the book gets elevated. Because once they get back to their respective homes, something from the house is with them, attaches itself to them. They all become obsessed. They all become fearful for their lives. They become fearful for their sanity. And they're all kind of experiencing the same kind of psychosis, even though they don't know about it because they're all in separate locations. And this is where the book really picks up its pace, picks up its intensity, and picks up its horror. I'm not going to tell you anything else about the book. How about that? Because that second half of the book, man, and this author does a great job of the first half is setting it all up. We're introduced to the characters. We know a little about their backgrounds, still more to come. We get through the interview, and I'm thinking, well, they get to leave the house. How terrible can that be? But then the second half shows exactly how terrible that could be. Because it's a lot of action. And what I really like is that this author puts his characters through a lot of pain, both mentally and physically. And not just like one or two things, but it seems like every turn of the page in that second half, something is happening to one of the characters. These characters that we've come to know and love in the first half, and we're rooting for them, We don't want them to die. We don't want them to go crazy. But evil is afoot. But just when you think it couldn't get any worse for them, you turn the page and here's the author throws in another thing to really either mess with their minds or mess them up even more physically than what they are. And you can feel their pain, man. He puts his characters through a meat grinder in this book. And I really like that because he spends all this time building up the characters and making us care and making us like them. And then he throws them to the wolves and just lets whatever nasty thing comes to his mind happens to them. And then just when you think, oh my God, they're in incredible pain, you can almost feel the pain coming through the pages. Your mind, your mind's going through the ringer as you're reading it. And just when you think it couldn't get any worse, well, here's another little twist, and that's going to hurt this character even more, if you can believe it. And I really like that. It's not I don't know why I like that, but I do. It's just pain upon pain upon pain, injury upon injury, mental anguish upon mental anguish. And this is one of those books where after you finish it, you feel like you want to go watch a Pixar movie just to get some of those images out of your head. And I'm saying that in the best possible way, by the way, because this book will make you feel the scary feelings. It'll put your mind through the ringer as you're engaged in the story and in this world. You're right there with the characters as they get hurt, as they think they're going crazy, as they start losing their mental capabilities. And the house itself is just plain old evil with very bad things inside. And that's the other thing about this book. Sometimes I don't like too much description about places and what people look like in books. But this one, the house is necessary. All the writing he did about the house was necessary, because if you don't know the layout of that house, later on you're going to be confused, because it plays an important part later to know that, okay, this character is in the kitchen, but this one's over here. And you need to know how far that is away and what's going on in those locations in order to get the full scope of the story. So I really, really appreciated that little touch. And like I said, for a book that was written 10 years before it was published, it just stands up as, to me, it just stood out as something that could have been written yesterday and probably been a bestseller in the horror community anyway, because it's just that good. It's a great book. I loved every page of it. And of course, I highly recommend it. You got to find out what happens to these guys. You just won't believe it. Some sections will have your jaw hanging open. And other times, like I said, you feel like you want to scrub brush your brain a little bit, but that's okay, because that's what a horror book's meant to do. So yeah, I highly recommend it, and I will leave a link down below to the Amazon page if you want to purchase it. Let me know what you think if you do, or if you've already read it. Leave me a comment. Also down below is a link to my Twitter. Hey, join me on Twitter, and we'll tweet weird things together. And as always, I want to thank you for taking a little bit of your time and spending it with me. I really, really appreciate you guys for watching. I love you. Stay safe. And until we meet again, keep reading spooky, my friends.